Rancher saved a stranger in a blizzard. Not knowing she ruled the largest ranch in the territory, the wind on Kestrel's Reach did not howl like it did on old Earth. It did not sound like wolves or storms in trees. It sounded like a huge machine that never slept, grinding ice against ice, trying to sand the world down until nothing was left. Eli Maris had lived with that sound for 12 years. He stood at the edge of his porch, pulling his scarf higher, and watched the snow move sideways. The sky was a hard gray sheet, broken only by thin lines of pale green light far above. The aurora was weak today, like the planet was tired. That meant the storm was not done. It was only getting started. His homestead lights glowed warm behind him, but he did not turn back inside. Out there, somewhere beyond the curtain of white, his herd was scattered across a wide valley. Frost grazers. Big, stubborn animals with thick fur and extra lungs, bred to survive thin air and freezing nights. They were his living bank, his food, his future, and his only real company most days. The ranch beacon on the roof blinked in steady rhythm. It was supposed to guide anyone home. But in this weather, it was like trying to light a candle in a waterfall. Eli checked his wrist pad. The map was half scrambled, lines jittering as the storm interfered with signals. The satellite link was down again. The warning icon flashed, magnetic disturbance. A fancy way to say the sky was angry. He could wait. He could let the herd handle itself. But he had learned that wait was how you lost animals on Kestrel's Reach. He stepped down into the snow, boots crunching, and walked to the shelter where his ride waited. It was not a sleek hover bike like the corporate folk used. Eli's mount was a beast, half animal, half machine, mostly attitude. A heavy six-legged stock runner with a broad back and a heat core in its chest. Eli called him Bramble because of his sharp temper and because he'd once trampled a thorn bush like it insulted him. Bramble lifted his head and snorted warm fog into the air. The beast's eyes were calm, though, like he'd been born for this exact kind of day. "Yeah," Eli muttered, rubbing his gloved hands together. "I know, I don't like it either." He strapped on his pack, checked the coil rope, and clipped a small flare pistol to his belt. Then he took a moment to touch the doorframe of his shelter, an old habit, like he was asking the house to hold steady until he came back. The moment he swung up onto Bramble's back, the wind hit harder, like the storm noticed him trying to leave. Snow slapped his goggles. He leaned forward and clicked his tongue, and Bramble moved into the white as if it were just fog. The first few minutes were familiar. Eli followed the fence line by memory, counting the posts he couldn't see. The fence was mostly useless during storms, but the posts were set deep and spaced with care. Eli had placed them himself, one by one, with his hands and a stubborn kind of hope. When the last fence post disappeared behind them, the world became a blank place. There were no trees here, only low rock ridges and buried grasses under the ice. Everything looked the same in a blizzard. If Eli lost his direction, he could ride in a circle until he froze. He opened his wrist pad again. The map flickered. A small cluster of dots, his herd tags, blinked weakly in the distance. They were farther out than he wanted. He frowned. "Come on," he told Bramble, though he knew it was Bramble's fault. They pushed forward. The cold did not bite at first, it pressed. Like a hand on the chest, steady and patient, waiting for weakness. After a while, Eli saw movement. Shapes in the storm, dark and hulking. Frost grazers. He counted quickly, 8, 9, 10. Good, but the herd was supposed to be 23. He rode closer, calling a low whistle. The animals turned their heavy heads. Steam rose from their noses. Their fur was crusted with snow like armor. Eli felt his shoulders relax for half a second. At least these were alive. Then he noticed the way they were standing. Not feeding, not moving, clustered tight. That meant trouble. He slid off Bramble and walked into their circle, careful not to spook them. His gloves touched warm fur. The animals were tense, shifting weight from leg to leg. He followed their gaze and saw a shallow dip in the ground, half filled with snow. Something metallic glinted under the white. Eli's heart jumped. Wreckage. He moved forward, using his boots to kick snow away. A smooth panel emerged, dark silver, stamped with a symbol he didn't recognize. Not local, not ranch gear, something off-world. He looked around, eyes narrowing behind his goggles. In a storm like this, anyone could crash, but why here? This valley was far from the official routes. Bramble gave a low warning rumble. Eli froze. A sound cut through the storm, not wind, not animal, a weak beep, a distress signal. Eli followed it, stepping carefully down into the dip. He found the source, an overturned hoversled, small but expensive, half buried and tilted at an angle. One side was cracked open. Blue sparks snapped from a torn cable, then died. The sled's power core was coughing its last breaths. He crouched and peered into the open section. At first he saw only darkness, then a shape, a person. A woman lay inside, curled as if trying to become smaller. Her suit was high-grade survival gear, the kind that rich corporate travelers bought because they thought money could replace skill. But it was torn at the shoulder and the heat strip on her chest was blinking red. Her face was pale, lips tinted blue. Snow had drifted across her hair and the wind tried to claim her with every second. Eli swore under his breath. He reached in and pressed 2 fingers to her neck. There was a pulse, slow but there. "Hey," he said loudly, though he knew she probably couldn't hear. "Hey, don't you die on me." He pulled at her harness, something snagged. He turned his head and saw a thin metal rod pinned across part of the sled frame. If he yanked too hard, he could injure her. Eli's mind ran through options. He could try to fix the sled. But in this storm, with a dying core and scrambled comms, it was a gamble. He could drag her on a makeshift sled, but the wind would tear them apart. He looked at Bramble. The beast stood steady, legs planted like a moving wall. Eli had hauled injured grazers on Bramble's back before. He could do it again. "All right," Eli said. "We're doing this the hard way." He crawled deeper into the wreck, feeling the cold metal through his gloves. He wedged his shoulder under the rod and pushed. Pain shot through his arm, but the rod shifted enough for him to slip it free. He tossed it aside, then worked the harness buckle with stiff fingers. The woman's suit was heavier than it looked, probably layered with impact foam and insulation. Eli braced himself and lifted her into his arms. She was limp, her head lolling against his shoulder, breath shallow. The wind slammed into him as soon as he backed out. He nearly lost his balance. Bramble shifted closer, offering his broad side. Eli moved fast. He hauled the woman up and over, laying her across Bramble's back in front of the saddle. He wrapped her arms loosely around the beast's neck, then used his coil rope to secure her to the harness points. Her head rolled slightly. Her eyelids fluttered once like she was trying to surface from deep water, but she sank again. Eli climbed up behind her, shielding her with his body as much as he could. He pulled his outer cloak forward, covering both of them. "Home," he told Bramble. "Now." Bramble turned into the storm and they started back. The wind was worse now. It wasn't just cold, it was loud. Eli's ears rang inside his hood. His goggles kept frosting at the edges, forcing him to blink hard and wipe them with his glove. He relied on memory and instinct. He counted in his head, tracking distance by the rhythm of Bramble's steps. He used the faint pull of gravity along the valley slope. He used the way the wind hit, slightly less from the left now, meaning they were angled toward the ridge he knew. The woman did not move. Eli kept one hand on her suit chest panel. The heat strip was still blinking red. "Come on," he muttered. "Stay with me, you made it this far." A sudden flash rippled across the sky. Green aurora turned bright, then twisted into sharp lines. Eli felt the hair under his hood rise. The storm was charged. His wrist pad buzzed once, then died completely. "Perfect," he said dryly. Bramble stumbled. Eli tightened his grip. Ahead, a dark shape rose out of the white. For a moment, Eli thought it was a rock ridge, but it moved, smooth and controlled. A drone. It hovered at head height, its body sleek and black, with a ring of sensors glowing faintly. Not ranch-made, not local, corporate or mercenary, maybe. Eli had seen their kind once before, scouting land before men came with papers and threats. It held position, silent, just watching. Eli's first instinct was to reach for his flare pistol, but shooting at a drone in a blizzard was like punching a ghost, and if it was broadcasting, it could bring worse. He kept riding, trying not to show fear. Bramble's legs kept pounding forward. The drone drifted closer, scanning. Eli felt a cold, prickling sensation on his skin, like invisible fingers tracing his coat. The drone's sensors lingered on the woman. Then it pulled back slightly and rotated, as if deciding something. A tiny light blinked on its underside. A transmission. Eli's stomach tightened. He couldn't hear words, but he didn't need to. Somebody out there wanted to know where she was, and now they would. The drone hovered a few more seconds, then rose into the storm and vanished as if it had never existed. Eli kept riding, jaw clenched. He pushed Bramble harder. The storm fought them the whole way. Twice Eli nearly missed a turn and had to correct by feel. Once Bramble sank into a hidden drift up to his joints, and Eli had to get down and dig with his hands until the beast could pull free. By the time the ranch beacon appeared as a faint blinking star in the white, Eli's muscles were shaking with exhaustion. He could feel the cold creeping into his fingers no matter how tight he clenched them. When they reached the fence line, Eli almost laughed in relief. He followed it like a lifeline back to the homestead. The porch light glowed. The house stood solid, half buried in snow but stubborn. Eli guided Bramble right up to the shelter, then slid off and began untying the rope with stiff hands. The woman sagged. Eli caught her, grunting with the effort, and dragged her inside. Warm air hit his face like a wave. For a second his vision blurred. He blinked hard and forced himself to keep moving. He kicked the door shut behind him, sealing out the screaming wind. Inside, the cabin was simple and lived in. A small kitchen, a table scarred with years of use, racks of tools on the walls, heat coils running along the floor. Eli laid the woman on a thick blanket near the main heater. He stripped off his gloves and placed his hands near the warmth, forcing blood back into them. Then he turned to the woman's suit. He didn't waste time trying to remove it completely. He checked the suit's heat pack. It was almost drained. Eli grabbed a spare ranch heat cell from a shelf and jury-rigged it into the suit's port. Sparks jumped, then settled. The chest strip changed from blinking red to steady amber. Her breathing deepened slightly. "Good," Eli said softly. He poured warm water into a cup, added a pinch of nutrient powder, and stirred it into a thin broth. He knelt beside her and pressed the cup to her lips, tipping just enough for a few drops. She coughed weakly, then swallowed. Her eyes opened, unfocused, gray-green irises, sharp even through exhaustion. She tried to sit up, but her body refused. "Easy," Eli said. "You're safe." For now, her gaze flicked around the room, taking in details fast, the tools, the patched walls, the old comm unit, the ranch tags hanging by the door. Then her eyes returned to his face. "Where?" Her voice was rough like sand. "My place," Eli answered. "You crashed in my valley. I found you. You're lucky." A faint breath of something like a laugh left her, or maybe it was just pain. "What's your name?" Eli asked. She hesitated, just a heartbeat too long. "Mara," she said finally. Eli nodded. He didn't push. People in the territory had reasons to keep things close. Out here, names were like keys. "I'm Eli," he said. "Drink a bit more. You were halfway frozen." Mara's eyes narrowed slightly as she watched him, not fearful, measuring. Outside, the storm slammed against the walls like fists. The house creaked, steady but tested. Eli stood and moved to the window. He wiped a circle in the frost and peered out into the white. Nothing but snow. Then, far out beyond the fence line, a faint light blinked once. Not his beacon, something higher, colder, moving through the storm. He felt his stomach drop. The drone had not just watched, it had marked. Behind him, Mara shifted, trying to sit again. Eli turned just in time to see her glance toward the door as if she already knew. "Someone is coming," she said, voice still weak but sure. Eli didn't ask how she knew. He just tightened his jaw and looked at the tools on the wall, then at the old rifle above the mantel, more for animals than for men. He had brought a stranger home to save her life. The cabin felt warmer than it had in years, but the warmth could not reach Eli's thoughts. He kept glancing at Mara, who sat up a little more now, the heat cell in her suit humming steadily. She was shivering still, though less violently, and her eyes scanned the cabin as if memorizing it, every shelf, every tool, every crack in the wall. Eli poured another small cup of the thin, nutrient broth he had made for her. He handed it to her carefully. She accepted it, drank slowly, and when she set it down, her hands lingered over it for a moment, trembling from both cold and the storm outside. "Better?" he asked quietly. She nodded. Her voice came out hoarse but firm. "Yes, I'll survive, thanks to you." Eli shrugged, trying to hide the pride he felt. He had learned long ago that being thanked could be dangerous in these parts. People expected kindness, then tried to use it. He didn't care about that now. He just wanted her safe. "You're welcome," he said. "Now tell me, who are you? What were you doing out in that storm alone?" Mara hesitated, blinking as if weighing her words. Her gaze flicked toward the window where the storm still raged, then back to him. "I'm a surveyor," she said finally. "I study the land, map it, see how settlements survive in different territories." Eli frowned. The story made sense, but he did not trust it. Surveyors didn't travel alone in storms like this, not on Kestrel's reach, not without a full escort and emergency backups. "You came a long way just for maps," he said slowly, "and the wind nearly killed you for it?" She gave a small, almost sad smile. Sometimes we take risks to understand a world, but maybe I underestimated it. Eli let the conversation drop. He had learned that people like Myra often revealed truths in their own time. The important thing now was survival. Outside, the storm rattled the cabin walls and whipped the snow in harsh waves. Inside, he tried to focus on practicalities: heat, water, and keeping Myra alive. He moved to the heater and adjusted the power coil, making sure it hummed steadily. Then he pulled out his kit bag. There were bandages, antiseptic wipes, and a few simple medical tools. Myra had no open wounds, thankfully, just frostbite forming along her fingers and cheeks. He wrapped her hands in warm cloth and massaged them gently to bring back circulation. "Cold doesn't like weakness," Eli said, half to himself. "You need to fight back." Myra's eyes met his, and there was a flicker of amusement, or maybe curiosity, in them. "You fought back every day here, haven't you?" Eli chuckled softly, the sound bouncing off the wooden walls. "Every day. Cold, beasts, storms, even the corporations when they think a small rancher like me is nothing. You learn to fight when the world is trying to bury you." She seemed to study him, her gray-green eyes sharp yet gentle. "You're resourceful." He waved her compliment away with a shrug. "Resourceful or stubborn, sometimes the same thing here." They were quiet for a few minutes, the storm filling the space with its unrelenting noise. Then Myra finally spoke again, her voice low. "You live far from any other settlements, yes?" 40 kilometers to the next homestead," Eli answered. 60 to the nearest small town, and another 20 beyond that is corporate territory. "Most people avoid this valley unless they have to," Mara's brow furrowed. "Then why help me?" Eli paused. Her question made him think. He had been alone here for years, taking care of beasts, fields, machines, and himself. He had rarely had anyone dependent on him, no one who could not fight for themselves. And yet, without thinking, he had risked himself to save a stranger. "Because someone needed saving," he said finally. "Storm doesn't care who you are, doesn't care about rank, money, or power. Only that you survive." Mara stared at him, a strange intensity in her gaze. She seemed to be measuring him, considering something deeper than words. Then she nodded slightly. "I understand, a rare kind of courage," Eli smirked. "Rare, maybe, or maybe it's just human." For the first time since she had arrived, Mara relaxed a little. She shifted onto the blanket, letting the heat seep into her frozen limbs. Eli moved to the table, pulling over a chair to sit and keep an eye on her. Silence stretched between them, but it was not uncomfortable. It was the kind of quiet that comes after effort, after a small victory. Hours passed like that, punctuated by small tasks: adjusting the heater, refilling the water, checking the cabin door and windows. The storm continued its furious dance outside, but inside, a fragile sense of calm settled. Eli found himself glancing at Mara often, wondering about her story, her world, and what had brought her to a valley so cruel and isolated. Eventually, the conversation returned, gently, almost cautiously. "What's this ranch called?" Mara asked, her voice softer now. Eli looked around the cabin. He had never really named it officially. Just Maris Ranch, that was enough. Maris Ranch. "Not much, but it keeps me alive," she nodded. "And the animals? My herd, frost grazers, tough creatures, stubborn but smart like me." He smiled faintly. "They keep me company and give me a reason to get up every morning." Mara's eyes glimmered with a faint admiration. "I've seen places like this before, but few people survive here without constant support." Eli shrugged. "I've learned to do with what I have, not much use complaining. The world doesn't stop for anyone." Outside, the wind screamed against the walls. The cabin shook slightly, and the snow pressed against the windows in waves. Eli glanced at the door. If anyone tried to come in during the storm, they would be foolish or desperate. Mara seemed unaware, or perhaps she was pretending. "You're careful," she said suddenly, almost as an observation rather than a question. "Not careless like the travelers I usually see." Eli raised an eyebrow. "Careless travelers die fast out here. You learn that quickly." She studied him in silence. Then, as if testing, she asked, "Do people usually live alone like this?" "Some do," Eli answered. "Most don't last. You need skill, patience, and stubbornness." She nodded again. "I see that now." The storm began to wane slightly, not fully, but enough for Eli to glance outside without feeling blind. Snow swirled, but shadows of ridges were visible. Somewhere beyond them, the valley stretched endlessly, frozen and indifferent. Eli thought of his herd. He had left most of them scattered in the open. He would have to check them tomorrow, even after the storm. But for now, Mara's survival was the priority. He glanced back at her. Her eyes were closed again, though she was awake enough to feel warmth through the suit. Something about her presence was unsettling, like she carried more than her simple story suggested. But Eli kept that thought tucked away. Out here, assumptions could be dangerous. As night approached, the cabin's interior glowed with dim warmth. Eli set a small lamp beside Mara, careful that it did not spill heat too fast. Then he sat back, leaning against the wall, hands folded over his knees. "I don't usually talk to strangers," he admitted softly, almost to himself. "You're lucky, or maybe I'm just soft." Mara opened her eyes, watching him through the dim light. "You're neither," she said quietly. "You're human, that counts for more than you think." Eli smiled faintly. He had heard the phrase before, humanity counted for nothing in a storm. But looking at her, listening to the wind outside, he realized it counted for everything. It had driven him to leave warmth for a frozen valley. It had pushed him to risk himself for another. Hours passed. The storm's roar began to settle into a dull rumble. Outside, the snow built in drifts, hiding the land in white blankets. Inside, Eli kept watch, listening to Mara's breathing, feeling the subtle rise and fall of her chest. For the first time in years, the cabin felt alive with more than just machines and animals. It felt alive with trust, fragile but powerful. Eli did not know who Mara truly was, what she owned, or the world she had walked. He only knew that she was here and he had saved her, and that, he thought, might be more important than anything else on Kestrel's reach. The night stretched long, but Eli did not sleep. Not yet. He kept an eye on the door, the windows, the weak blinking beacon outside, and the stranger he had rescued. Somewhere in the storm, someone, or something, was looking for her. And Eli knew that when they came, he would have to fight. But for now, inside the quiet, warm cabin, he allowed himself a small measure of peace. Mara was alive. The storm could rage all it wanted. He would face it as he always had. And maybe, just maybe, the valley had a story to tell, one that would survive the wind, the snow, and the cold nights ahead. The storm had finally loosened its grip, leaving behind a landscape of white that stretched endlessly in every direction. Snow lay thick on ridges and in the valleys, hiding tracks and shapes beneath its smooth surface. The wind still whispered, but it was calmer now, like the world had paused for a moment to breathe. Eli Maris stepped out onto the porch, his boots crunching against crusted snow. Bramble shifted beside him, shaking off frost, his 6 legs leaving deep imprints in the frozen ground. Eli's gaze scanned the valley. The herd was mostly accounted for, though the frost grazers had spread out farther than he liked. Tracking them would take hours. But something else caught his attention, a dark shape moving in the distance. It was small, low to the ground, almost invisible against the white, yet deliberate. Not an animal, not a drifting snow mound. Something man-made. He frowned. That wasn't supposed to be here. The storm had likely blinded anyone attempting to reach the valley, yet here it was. Eli's hand moved to the flare pistol at his belt, though he didn't draw it. He studied the shape. It seemed scanning. Slowly, methodically, someone was watching him. Inside the cabin, Mara stirred. She had regained more strength overnight. Her gray-green eyes opened, and she immediately noticed Eli's tense posture. "Something out there," she said softly. Eli nodded. "I saw it. Too small to be a vehicle, too purposeful to be a drift. Maybe a drone, maybe a scout." He paused, thinking. "It's close enough that if it reports back, we'll have visitors soon." Mara studied him. There was no fear in her eyes, only observation. "Then we should prepare," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Not everyone who comes is friendly." Eli had expected fear, not composure. Her words carried authority, quiet but unmistakable. He narrowed his eyes. Who was this woman? "We survive by understanding the land, knowing what it can do to us," she continued. "And by knowing what others might try." Eli had lived his entire life on Kestrel's reach following that principle. And yet here was someone, a stranger, speaking the same truth, almost as if she belonged to the same world. He had saved her, yes, but now he realized he might have stepped into a larger story than he had imagined. "Come on," Eli said, moving back into the cabin. "Let's get the door reinforced and set up the sensors. If anything tries to reach us, I want a warning before it's on top of us." Mara watched silently as he worked. Eli patched weak spots in the door frame and adjusted the old security sensors, devices he had built himself over years, simple but effective. He had designed them to trigger audible alarms if the snow shifted unnaturally, if heavy shapes moved within the valley, or if any machine attempted to land nearby. Myra observed each adjustment carefully, taking in his methods, as if she were studying not only the tools but the man using them. By mid-morning, the cabin was fortified. The wind outside had slowed, but the threat lingered. Mara, now fully out of her suit, sat wrapped in blankets beside the heater. "I need to tell you something," she said, finally breaking the silence. Eli glanced at her. "Go ahead." "I'm not just a surveyor," she admitted. Her words were precise, deliberate. "I manage one of the largest ranch territories in this sector, the Calder Expanse. I have responsibilities that reach far beyond this planet." Eli froze mid-motion, a wrench in his hand. The largest ranch, one that controlled trade routes, land, and orbital access. That Mara had risked venturing here alone. He felt the weight of his own small homestead against that magnitude. "Your royalty?" he asked, though the word felt wrong. She shook her head. "Not royalty, leadership, stewardship, but people with power, they attract attention. And sometimes danger." Eli's mind raced. The strange drone outside, the storm, the way she had assessed him as soon as she arrived, it all made sense now. Mara Calder was important, vital even. And now he had her in his cabin, small, fragile, and alive. "And you trust me?" he asked, incredulous. "I'm just a frontier rancher, a nobody in comparison to—" "You saved me," she said simply. "That counts more than your status." Eli didn't know whether to laugh or shake his head in disbelief. People rarely saw acts like that as anything more than chance, but here was Mara stating it plainly. Human courage mattered. That alone felt significant. Outside, a low hum began to rise, subtle at first, like distant machinery moving over the snow. Eli's hand went instinctively to his pistol, but Mara held up a finger. "They're scouts," she said. "Corporate scouts trying to locate me or the ranch. They'll report back if they find anything." Eli's jaw tightened. "Then we make sure they don't," she nodded. "Yes. But not with brute force, with strategy. You have something they do not, understanding of this land and its limits. That knowledge can protect us more than firepower." Eli looked at her. The words were calm, but the tone carried weight. He felt a spark of respect, or maybe challenge. She was testing him, not with weapons, but with intellect, and he liked it. He spent the next hours preparing. He rigged extra traps around the cabin, mechanical tripwires, decoy sensors, and small alarm drones he could launch from the porch if necessary. Bramble patrolled the perimeter beside him, a silent guardian, his 6 legs digging into snow and ice. Mara worked alongside him in small ways, passing tools, helping him check the traps, and observing silently. By evening, the first real contact occurred. A faint glow appeared at the edge of the ridge, a small hovercraft barely visible in the fading light. Eli crouched behind the porch railing, heart pounding. Mara's calm hand rested briefly on his shoulder. "They're testing you," she said. "See how easily they can find you." The craft hovered, scanners blinking. Eli could almost feel the calculation behind every movement. Whoever was inside was cautious, professional, and well-equipped. He signaled Bramble to remain still. The frost grazer machine hybrid froze like a statue, heat cores dimmed, body low. Eli held his breath. The hovercraft moved again, slow and precise, then rose and retreated over the ridge. No shots, no alarms, just observation. "They'll be back," Mara said. Her voice was calm but carried authority. "And next time they might not leave empty-handed." Eli nodded. "Then we prepare." No surprises. Night fell and the valley was quiet, save for the soft hum of the heater and the occasional crackle from the wind outside. Myra settled near the fire, her eyes reflecting its glow. Eli sat across from her, keeping watch. "You have many people under your care, don't you?" he asked. "More than I can count," Mara admitted. "Settlers, workers, even orbital personnel. My decisions affect thousands, and yet here in this cabin I am just a person who needed help." Eli understood. There was a difference between power and survival, he knew it well. You could control land, machines, wealth, but you could never control the storm. You could only endure it. "Most of them would not survive a night like last night," Eli said. "Most of them would not," Myra agreed. "That is why I came here, to see the frontier for myself, to understand how humans endure without the safety of vast resources, to see courage that is not granted by money or status." Eli felt a strange warmth in his chest. Here was someone who understood his life in a way few people ever had. And yet danger still lingered outside. Hours later, as they talked quietly, another shadow appeared on the ridge. This one larger, more confident. Tracks followed its path, made by heavy machinery. Mara's eyes narrowed. "They have found us," she said. Eli checked his traps and weapons. Bramble growled low, sensing the disturbance. The cabin's sensors started to blink, their alarms quiet but unmistakable. "They want information," Mara said softly. "Maybe my location. Maybe you." They see value in a frontier rancher who can survive the storm. Eli swallowed. He had survived storms, predators, and isolation. He had even faced mercenary scouts before, but the presence of Mara Calder changed everything. His homestead was no longer just a small ranch, it had become a shield, a fortress for someone who could change the fate of thousands. They spent the night in preparation, checking every trap, every weak point, every escape route. The wind still hissed outside, but Eli and Mara worked in harmony, instinct and authority balancing each other. By dawn, the hovercraft returned, this time more boldly. It descended into the valley, lights scanning, and Eli felt the first real test of his frontier skills. Mara stood beside him, calm, confident, a silent promise that strategy and courage could be as strong as any weapon. And for the first time, Eli realized that the storm he had fought for years had prepared him for more than survival. It had prepared him to defend someone who mattered, not just to him, but to the entire sector. The valley waited, white and indifferent, but Eli Maris was ready, and Mara Calder had chosen to trust him. The storm outside was over, but a new one had arrived, one of humans against machines, courage against calculation. And in that quiet, frozen morning, a small frontier rancher and a powerful landholder prepared to face it together. The first light of dawn barely cut through the thick clouds. The valley was a frozen expanse of white, but the silence had a weight heavier than any storm. Eli Maris stood outside his cabin, Bramble beside him, ears twitching, muscles coiled for movement. The frost grazers were huddled in a nearby drift, sensing the tension in the air. From the ridge above, a new set of shapes moved, hovercrafts, larger this time, equipped with scanners and weapons. They weren't scouts anymore. These were enforcement units, corporate or mercenary, here to seize information or worse. Eli felt the familiar surge of resolve. He had faced dangers before, but this time he wasn't just defending himself. Mara Calder's life and her territory were at stake. Inside, Mara adjusted her suit, now fully operational again, though she did not need it to survive. Her eyes were calm, focused. "They've come prepared," she said, "but they underestimate humans who live on the frontier." Eli glanced at her, surprise flickering across his face. "You mean what I've built here, it matters?" "It matters more than they know," Mara said. "And it matters because it was built by a human who understands this land. Not algorithms, not corporations, but a human mind. That gives us an advantage." Eli grunted. He didn't need her approval, but it felt good to hear. For years, he had fought against storms, cold, machines, and greedy strangers. And now, someone with power and experience recognized what he had done. The first hovercraft descended slowly, its scanners sweeping the valley. Eli gave a quiet signal to Bramble. The beast froze in place, blending with the snow drifts. Eli and Mara watched as the craft scanned the cabin, then paused. A moment passed, and the pilot's voice crackled faintly, though Eli could not understand it. Whatever message it carried, it was meant for someone powerful, someone not present. Eli checked the traps he had set overnight. Mechanical tripwires, decoy sensors, alarm drones, all in place. Mara moved beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Remember," she said quietly, "they may have firepower, but they lack knowledge. Use what you know, the land is your ally." He nodded. He had survived by knowing the ground beneath him, the patterns of wind and snow, the paths animals took, and the hidden weaknesses in machines that were never designed to operate in such conditions. That knowledge, combined with Myra's strategic mind, created a force they could leverage. The first hovercraft fired a warning shot, a pulse that shook the snow but caused no harm. Eli ducked behind the porch railing. Myra's hand found his arm. "Do not respond with aggression," she said. "Let them come closer. Watch, learn, and strike when it matters most." Eli's jaw tightened. Let them come closer. It went against everything he had been taught about survival, but he trusted her instincts. She had authority in her calm, and he had learned that sometimes patience was stronger than immediate action. The hovercraft descended further into the valley, unaware of the traps and the subtle devices scattered across the snow. Eli's alarm drones, camouflaged by frost, remained still until triggered. When the craft passed over the first hidden sensor, a tiny signal emitted, a flash, a beep enough to disorient the machine's scanners. The hovercraft paused, sensors blinking, but it did not retreat. It was cautious, calculating. Eli felt a surge of pride. His simple inventions, crude by high-tech standards, were effective. Humans could adapt in ways machines could not anticipate. From behind, Mara spoke quietly. "Now," she said, "the next move is ours." Eli took a deep breath. Using his knowledge of the valley, he activated several traps in sequence. Small mechanical winches released snowfalls from hidden ridges, masking movement and creating artificial obstacles. Noisemakers hidden under snow mimicked the sounds of approaching animals, confusing the hovercraft's sensors. The pilot cursed, though Eli could not hear the words. The craft's scanner lights flickered, struggling to distinguish real threats from illusions. Mara smiled faintly. They are learning the hard way that humans adapt. Eli realized something. Every move they made, every small defense they deployed was more than survival. It was a lesson. Humans, when pressed, could think faster than machines, improvise, and turn the environment into a weapon. Mara had seen that in him in this small valley, and now the enemies would see it too. The hovercraft hovered closer, and Eli could make out the pilot for the first time. A suited figure, professional and calm, but clearly not expecting resistance of this kind. They had assumed a small rancher would be easy to intimidate. They had assumed Mara's presence alone would scare him into submission. They were wrong. Eli tapped into every lesson he had learned over the years. He guided Bramble through narrow paths hidden by snow drifts, using the terrain to limit the hovercraft's movement. When the pilot tried to maneuver into a more advantageous position, they found themselves blocked by ridges and fallen snow, unable to use their full firepower. Meanwhile, Mara directed subtle communications, signaling Eli with small gestures. She did not command, she suggested, guiding him without overstepping. Eli realized she had studied him, not just the terrain, and was trusting him to act, to lead in his domain. The battle continued like this for hours. No one fired lethal shots. No one needed to. The valley itself was enough. Snowfalls, sudden drifts, hidden sensors, decoy movements, Eli's frontier ingenuity turned the landscape into a fortress. The hovercraft struggled, forced to retreat repeatedly, unable to locate the cabin or Mara within the maze of obstacles. Finally, as afternoon approached, Eli and Mara stood on the porch, watching the last hovercraft pull back, its sensors blinking in retreat. The valley was quiet once more, the snow settling like a calm after the storm. Mara turned to Eli, her expression calm but proud. "You did exactly what I hoped," she said. "You defended not just yourself but me. And in doing so, you showed the kind of human ingenuity that cannot be replicated by machines or corporations." Eli shook his head, feeling the weight of exhaustion. "I just survive. That's all I know. I don't have armies or resources." "I have Bramble, my herd, and a lot of stubbornness." She smiled faintly. "That is more than enough. That is what makes humans remarkable. The willingness to endure, adapt, and protect what matters. You have reminded me why humans are unstoppable when united by purpose." Eli looked at her, seeing for the first time the true measure of her strength. She did not rely solely on power, wealth, or technology. She relied on people. She trusted humans to make choices, to fight, and to protect. And in that trust, she had chosen him. The frost grazers stirred nearby, sensing the valley's calm. Eli checked them quickly, making sure they were safe and unharmed. They had survived the storm, the night, and the intrusion. Just like him, they had endured. As the sun lowered behind distant ridges, casting long shadows across the snow, Mara turned to him. "There will be more attempts. They will not give up easily." "I know," Eli said, "but we'll be ready. Every ridge, every drift, every path. I know this land. And now we know each other. That counts for more than anything they can throw at us." Mara nodded, the wind catching a few strands of her hair. "Then let them come. We will show them that courage, strategy, and human spirit are stronger than any machine or weapon. We are not alone in this valley, and we are not afraid." Eli felt a surge of determination. For the first time, he understood that his small homestead was no longer just a survival outpost. It had become a symbol, a testament to what humans could do when they worked with their minds, their courage, and each other. The hovercrafts had retreated for now, but Eli knew this was only the beginning. More would come, seeking Mara, seeking the Calder expanse, or simply testing him. And when they did, he would not be afraid. He would fight with what he had, knowledge, skill, and human ingenuity. And Mara. She would stand beside him, not as a figure of authority demanding obedience, but as an ally who recognized the power of a human mind and spirit. Together, they had turned the valley into a place of strength. As night fell, Eli and Mara prepared the cabin for the hours ahead. He checked the traps, the alarm drones, and the perimeter once more. Bramble rested, but his muscles were tense, ready for the slightest movement. The frost grazers huddled in the nearest drift, peaceful but alert. Eli poured 2 cups of hot broth, handing one to Mara. "To the valley," he said simply. Mara took it, her eyes reflecting the cabin's warm glow. "To humans," she corrected gently, "and to what they can endure." They drank in silence, watching the storm clouds fade behind distant ridges. The valley was quiet now, but Eli knew the calm was temporary. Threats would return, but they would not catch him unprepared. Not while he had Bramble, his knowledge of the land, and the trust of Mara Calder. The horizon held promise, danger, and challenge. And in that frozen valley, 2 humans, one a frontier rancher, the other a powerful landholder, stood ready. Together they would endure, adapt, and defend what mattered. For Eli Maris, the storm had not ended, but neither had his courage. For Mara Calder, the frontier had taught her a lesson she would carry beyond the valley. That power alone was nothing without humans who understood, endured, and acted. And together, they had shown that even in the harshest conditions, human spirit could stand unbroken. The valley waited, silent and cold, but ready to witness what humans could do when they refused to surrender. The valley was quiet at first light, the snow untouched except for Bramble's deep tracks and the subtle marks of frost grazers. The storm that had raged days before had finally ended, leaving behind a bright, cold clarity. The sky was pale blue, and the sun glinted off the ice, making everything sparkle like scattered stars. Eli Maris stood on the porch of his cabin, scanning the horizon. He felt every ridge, every drift, every subtle slope under the snow as if the valley were part of him. Bramble shifted beside him, muscles tense, ears twitching. Eli could feel the energy in the beast. They both knew the storm outside had passed, but another challenge was already approaching. Mara Calder had stayed up most of the night, watching the horizon, planning, studying, and preparing. Even as powerful as she was, she respected the land. She knew the humans who lived here were shaped by it, made stronger by every challenge. "They'll be here soon," Mara said, her voice quiet but steady. "They won't stop until they think they've taken control." Eli nodded. "Let them come, we've got the advantage. They've seen what we can do already." "Not enough," she said. "They've adapted. Next time they'll be smarter, faster, more aggressive. You and I will need to be faster and smarter too." He glanced at her, seeing for the first time the full measure of her authority. Mara Calder did not command through fear or force. She commanded through understanding and trust, through intelligence and strategy. She had chosen him as her ally, not her subordinate. That fact alone gave Eli a surge of pride. "Then we'll show them the valley can't be conquered," Eli said, gripping his rifle tightly, "and that humans are smarter than any machine or corporation." Mara smiled faintly, a glint of respect in her gray-green eyes. "Exactly." The first signs of their adversaries appeared mid-morning. Far above the valley, hovercrafts moved like black dots against the snow. They were larger than the scouts, carrying heavier weapons and more sophisticated sensors. Eli felt the familiar tension building in his chest. He had faced storms, predators, and corporate drones before, but this was different. This was organized force, designed to intimidate and overpower. He checked the traps he had reinforced overnight. Mechanical tripwires, decoy sensors, small snow alarms, all carefully placed in hidden drifts and behind ridges. Bramble moved silently through the snow, ready to respond to any movement. Mara had studied the valley alongside him, noting every blind spot, every advantageous position. Together, they had transformed a simple frontier ranch into a fortress shaped by humans' greatest strength, ingenuity. The hovercrafts descended carefully, scanning the valley. Eli crouched behind the porch, eyes narrowing. Mara was beside him, calm, focused. "Remember," she whispered, "observe, anticipate, then act. The land is ours." Eli gritted his teeth. This was more than survival now. This was human determination against mechanical precision, courage against calculation. The first hovercraft moved into range of Eli's traps. He activated a sequence he had designed in advance. A small avalanche slid down a ridge, masking their movement and forcing the craft to adjust. Noise-making devices created phantom shapes moving across the snow, confusing the sensors. Another hidden tripwire released a cascade of snow, hiding false tracks. The hovercraft faltered, scanning repeatedly, unsure of what it had seen. Mara's eyes gleamed. "They underestimate the humans who know their land," she said softly. Eli smiled faintly. "They'll learn." The hovercraft tried to approach again, adjusting altitude and direction. Eli signaled Bramble. The beast moved, a silent force, guiding the frost grazers toward key positions. The animals, trained to respond to his commands, spread across the valley, creating natural barriers and distractions. The hovercraft's sensors struggled to differentiate between moving machines, animals, and snowdrifts. One of the crafts attempted to get closer, its weapons scanning for threats. Eli took a deep breath. He had never fired at humans before, but these were not here to negotiate. He waited for the right moment. Mara watched, her hand resting lightly on his arm. She did not command him. She simply trusted him to act. Then it came. A mechanical arm from the hovercraft attempted to cut through the snow barrier. Eli fired a flare from his pistol, aimed at a small heat sensor nearby. The flare triggered a chain reaction: alarms, smoke, snow avalanches. The hovercraft reeled, its sensors blinded, forced to retreat. "Good," Mara said, her voice calm but firm. "Keep pressure on them. Make them second-guess every move." Eli adjusted another trap, releasing a hidden snowbank to create a natural barrier. The hovercrafts faltered, forced to retreat once more. They were cautious now, aware that this valley, small as it seemed, was alive with human cunning. Mara nodded approvingly. "They will test patience, but humans endure with patience, and with patience comes advantage." Hours passed. The hovercrafts made repeated attempts, each time met with ingenious resistance. Eli and Mara worked in sync, combining his intimate knowledge of the land with her strategic insight. Every ridge, every drift, every hidden path became a tool. Every frost, grazer, and bramble's presence turned the valley into a living fortress. By late afternoon, the hovercrafts had retreated to the distant ridges. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the snow. Eli exhaled, muscles aching from hours of vigilance. Myra stood beside him, scanning the horizon, but her expression was calm, almost serene. "They've learned their lesson," she said, "for now, but they will not stop entirely." Eli shook his head. "Let them come. Every time they do, they'll see humans can adapt faster than machines, that courage matters more than technology." Mara's eyes softened. "You've taught me something too," she admitted. "Even with all the resources I control, I've never seen someone make the land itself a weapon. You remind me that humans matter more than numbers, more than machinery. Courage and creativity, that is strength." Eli felt a warmth in his chest. For years, he had lived in isolation, relying on his hands, mind, and stubbornness. He had never thought of it as power. But Mara saw it for what it was: pure human power, earned through endurance, skill, and spirit. As night approached, they returned to the cabin. Bramble patrolled the perimeter, alert and watchful. The frost grazers huddled close, their instinct guiding them to safety. Eli and Mara checked every trap, every alarm, and every hidden sensor once more. They had survived the day, but tomorrow would bring new tests. They sat together by the heater, sipping hot broth, the warmth spreading through their bodies. Outside, the valley lay silent, but Eli knew the quiet was temporary. He glanced at Mara. "You know," he said, "I've never had anyone trust me like this before, and I've never trusted anyone either." She looked at him, her gray-green eyes steady. "Trust is earned, Eli, and you earned it. You saved me when I was vulnerable, without question. That is worth more than armies or machines." He nodded. For the first time, he realized something profound. Survival alone was not enough. Protecting others, standing for something greater than oneself, that was where true strength lay. Days passed. The valley remained tense but quiet. Mara stayed with Eli, observing the land, learning from him, and sharing her own knowledge. Together, they devised strategies to protect not just the cabin, but the surrounding homesteads, creating a network of human resilience that no corporation could easily break. Word of their resistance spread quietly among the frontier communities. Settlers, previously isolated, began to prepare for threats, inspired by Eli's ingenuity and Mara's leadership. Humans working together, adapting to the land and protecting each other, became a force beyond reckoning. One morning, Eli watched a group of new settlers arrive, cautious but hopeful. Myra explained that they would receive support, guidance, and protection from the Calder expanse. But more importantly, they would learn what Eli had shown her. That courage, intelligence, and understanding of one's environment were more powerful than any weapon. As the sun rose higher, casting warm light over the valley, Eli stood on the porch once more. Bramble shifted beside him, and the frost grazers grazed nearby. Mara joined him, her eyes scanning the horizon with quiet satisfaction. "This valley," she said, "will stand as a symbol, not of wealth or machines or power alone, but of what humans can endure and achieve when they work together, when they trust, when they fight with courage and intelligence." Eli nodded, feeling the weight and joy of it. "And it starts with small actions," he said. "One person saving another. One rancher using what he knows to protect his home. One valley standing against impossible odds." Mara smiled. "Exactly, and now it is more than one valley. It is the start of a movement. Humans across this sector will see that power is nothing without those willing to act, adapt, and protect." The valley lay peaceful, but alive with potential. The frost grazers moved across the snow, Bramble patrolled silently, and the cabins in the distance glimmered with the promise of human ingenuity and spirit. Eli and Mara stood side by side, looking at the horizon. Together, they had endured storms, machines, and threats. Together, they had shown that humans, small as they might seem, could rise to any challenge. The sun dipped behind distant ridges, casting a golden glow across the snow. The wind whispered gently, no longer a threat, but a reminder that the world was alive and waiting. Eli Maris, the small frontier rancher, had saved a stranger. And in doing so, he had proven that human courage, ingenuity, and endurance could change not just a valley, but a sector, and perhaps even the stars beyond. Mara Calder, landholder of the Calder Expanse, had learned that power alone was nothing without humans who understood, adapted, and acted. And together, they had built a legacy written not in wealth, not in machines, but in the enduring spirit of humanity. The valley waited, silent and vast, but it had already witnessed the impossible. Two humans standing against the odds, unbroken, united, and victorious.